birds, I guess back in August 2013, I was fishing one day at my parents' place in Briggs. It's in northeast Burnet County on Rocky Creek. I was down in the creek looking for some bass, but I found that instead. That's after I had brushed away some of the dirt, but that was when everything was still in the ground. And the bigger bone on the right, underneath the root, that's a knee bone, and that was what was exposed initially. And the piece that I saw of that bone there was about the size of a piece of chalkboard chalk. And so I started digging at it. I put my fishing pole down and started digging at it, and realized there was a big bone just stuck in the ground right there. And so I came back, I guess maybe a week or two later, and dug some more, and I found another bone, and then another one. And so I didn't know what it was, and I took it to the University of Texas. They have, once or twice a year, they have a fossil ID thing where you can bring in fossils, and they told me that it was bison bones. In the meantime, I had gone online and asked other people, what they thought they were, and I got everything from dinosaurs to a whale. So nobody really, once I finally went to UT, they said, no, those are bison leg bones. And so, let's see, what this together.
IT.
There we go. So where this was, it was on a slope. Let me see if I can pause this here. Here we go. It was. There we go. Around the corner. So you can see the slope there that it was on. It was.
That's looking down.
That's looking down from the top of the slope after we had cleared some of the land away. Okay, yes, thank you. So that's what it started to look like as we went along. My cousin Seth and I, we went down there and we figured we would dig all the bones out, but then, after a day, we had hardly gotten anything uncovered. So, and the bones were just kind of falling apart, the rib bones. So basically, it looked like that, and I think those are some of the rib and leg bones right there before we had uncovered anything. And what we did was you can see the rope there. We had to hang a small scaffold and some kayak seats off of a tree, and so we could kind of rappel down and dig these bones out, because we were still about maybe a dozen feet from the creek bottom, and there was no other way to get to it because it was just a vertical shear. That's the horn. When I found that, that's when I knew probably the entire animal was in there. At that point, I think I covered it up for a few months and decided to come back. Those are some of the rib bones, and you can see the scaffold there that we were hanging from as we were going along. And I should say that I have no professional background in any kind of science. I live in Austin, and I work in healthcare, and this is just a hobby. So by this point, this was a few months later, and we had covered it up. Whenever we weren't digging, I would cover it back up. Those are some of the rib bones there that we exposed. And so that's what it looked like when we would cover it up. And I think I left it like that for about, 6 months. At this point, we realized there was a whole entire animal in there, and we were doing damage to the bones. And that's when I decided to call somebody who knew what they were doing. And that's how I found David Callum and Bruce Turner. They're the guys who came out and ended up about 6 months later doing the excavation. Let's see. So you can't really see the creek bottom there, but it's from the bottom of that tarp down to the creek bed below is still another about 8 feet.
Mm-hmm.
my brother came down with his excavator, and we ended up removing about, I guess, 7 or 8 feet of overburden soil on top of it so we could get to it. One of the things we were trying to do was not knock over the trees, because the bison skeleton, it had roots growing all through it, and so if we would have ripped the trees out, it would have just pulverized it. So we were really careful, and my brother's a skilled excavator, so we were able to, I was kind of just inching him along, and he finally was able to pull back and clear out all this area. That's what it looked like when we were done with the pathway. So the bison was down there where that pile of dirt is at the end of that runway, and the creek is down below. There's David with the skull finally being exposed. This was after, I guess, about a half a day of digging right here. So back in April and May of 2014, that's when we went out and we excavated this. That's what it looked like after we had just exposed it. And you can see the tree root right there coming out of the eye socket. So that's why we had to be pretty careful with it. It was kind of precarious. And as we went along, it just it was almost all just about the entire skeleton was there except for the feet. Yeah, the feet I guess they maybe had eroded away because the way the bison was positioned in the creek, its legs were sticking out on the side of the bank, like right where David is standing in the photo. So I don't know we don't really know what happened to the animal, but its feet were gone by the time we found it. We screened all of the dirt around it and inside the cavities of where the animal's body would have been. We were looking for signs of human butchering and like arrowheads or pieces of flint. We did find a couple of small pieces of flint that were inside the animal's interior, like right around its rib cage. That might indicate that maybe it was shot with an arrow at some point. David said he's certain about it, so I trust his judgment. But that's what we were doing here. We were screening everything, and then we would bag the dirt. I actually sent a lot of the dirt around to different people around the country, and they did microfossil testing, all of which came back unremarkable, but they wanted to do that. I got a lot of interest from people all over the country that I found on certain websites that wanted like measurements. They were doing research. They wanted soil samples. I sent one of the teeth from Oklahoma to California and back. Actually, it was an entire jawbone, and they used one of the teeth out of it. But they were looking for DNA clues because this bison came from a time in roughly, the carbon dating revealed it to be from anywhere between 1308 to 1424 AD. So it's about 700 years old. It lived during a time when, over in Europe, the Black Plague was killing a third of the population, and Mongol warlords were fighting around Siberia, and over here in Texas, people were still in the Stone Age. So we were really hoping to find some link to the people that lived here at that time, because one of the reasons that we were interested in doing this was because this is the end of the prehistoric era, right before the first Europeans came to this continent. And when that happened, the Europeans, they would travel in large groups with lots of animals, and so sometimes their livestock would go off into the wild, or sometimes they would purposely leave it so when they came back there would be more wild animals that they could use for food. So when that happened, their cattle, they started interbreeding with bison. And so almost all of the bison now that are alive today, they have traces of cattle DNA in them. So they really wanted to, the National Bison Association really wanted to try to get the DNA to compare this prehistoric DNA with the modern DNA and see what they can do, what they can find out what the difference is. But in the end, the teeth were too mineralized and they couldn't get any DNA out of them. So we spent 2 weekends doing that. It was really fun. Let's see. So as we went along, the first weekend we concentrated on the skull. So we got the skull out. And the second weekend we got the rest of the bones. And so it sat in my study for a while after we got it out. And I contacted the University of Texas Paleontology Lab for help because I was trying to get the dirt off of the skull and still keep it together, but it was just deteriorating and falling apart. It was almost like parts of it had the consistency of a saltine cracker. So it was very fragile, and I wanted to make sure that it didn't fall apart anymore. So I sought help at UT from a retired professor there named Ernie Lundelius, and he was very kind, and he took me in and he showed me how to apply a certain type of chemical onto the bones to harden it. And so that took about 6 months because you drip it into the cracks of the bones, and then it comes in and basically just hardens the bone from the inside out. So when I did that, if you haven't seen the skull already, it's the interior of it. It still has all of the soil inside it because that's the only thing that held it all together. That's kind of a back view of the skull and the neck. And from one end, from the nose to the tail, I guess it was probably about 9 feet long, 8 or 9 feet long. That's one of the tailbones there. That looks like right before we got the skull out. Yeah, so there it is. The skull is now removed, and you can see the ribs there. And we came back the next weekend and got the rest of it. And as we went along, when certain parts of the skull would fall off, I would make sure to bag those and write on the bag what part of the skull it came from. So that way, whenever somebody puts it back together, I thought I could do it, but I quickly realized that that's way beyond my pay grade. But that's some of the hardening agent that I put on it. These are just pictures from the dig. And so this was found in Rocky Creek, South Rocky Creek, which is a tributary of the Lampasas River, about 8 miles south of the Lampasas River. This is my wife's grandmother, Marietta Mesky. She spent her 95th birthday there at the dig site. So she'd never seen anything like it, and I think she was pretty excited. So that kind of gives you an idea of what we were working with. Before we had removed the top part where we're sitting at the top, it looked like the dense brush to the left and right of it. And so we made sure to properly excavate it. David has excavated hundreds of, maybe thousands of sites, I guess. But he how long have you been doing that? 20, 30 years?
I've been digging.
But yeah, so he knew what to do. So we kept an index of everything, and we excavated it according to archaeological procedures, and kept a record of everything. That's what it looked like when it was all bagged up, and before we put it up. There it is right there. That's all of it, except for the skull. And so that sat in the attic for a couple of years until I met Dr. Hester, and they indicated that they wanted it. So I'm so glad that it can be here and it can be seen rather than just sitting in an attic. This is a painting that was done by Becky Reiser. Becky, are you here? Okay, I guess she's not here. She was part of the digging crew, and she painted that. So, and I've got that framed in my living room. But I thought she was going to be here, but I guess not. So I guess that's the last photo, and if anybody has any questions, I can answer them. Yes, sir?
What do you think the original span of the horns is?
I don't really know. Between the horns with just the skull alone was 12 inches, and each horn core was probably about 6 inches. So that didn't include the actual horns. That's just the core of the horns. So I would say maybe a little more than 2 feet.
So this was a long horn?
I don't know. It's it's the difference between a bison is the horns go up. But she was a 7-year-old female, and weighed about 1,200 to 1,800 pounds. I think. Ethan. How long was the animal? I think about 9 feet long.
Dead or alive?
Dead. I don't know about alive. Do you have a question? Jeffy? I can't hear him. What do you say?
I'm not sure.
But, well, yeah, thank you all for being here. And I hope you enjoy this museum. It's a great place.
Can you expound on what you just learned this week from Chris?
Yes, I got an email. That's one of the things that's just making the decision to dig this out has led us in so many different directions. I've made a lot of friends. I've gotten to meet prominent people that I have seen their names in books. I've got Arrowhead books and stuff, and I'm like, hey, I know that guy. But I got contacted by a man in Dallas who he mounts fossils for the Ross Perot Natural Museum in Dallas, and he has offered to donate his time and efforts to piecing this back together.